Quad66, welcome back to the couch. Check out that build. This build, I really got to give a shout out to NewBeeDrone. Kelvin reached out to me after my failure with the Hummingbird V3 board. And he reached out and said, hey, if you really want to do something cool with a really light build, if you really want to push the envelope, I've got a board for you. And so he hooked me up with the Racer edition of this board. And so what we're going to do here is a couple things. One is first we're going to jump to some cuts on filming stuff on the table, going over the full build here, also going over the Hummingbird V3 board. And then I'm going to come back here to the couch, going to put in some batteries, put this quad up in the air and show you the good things that I really like about it and some of the things that are not so great. But some of this was to be expected because with this one, this was really just kind of scratching an itch of what happens when we go really light. And so I got my answer, and it's some of the answers are, I think, are pretty interesting. Okay, so let's go to the tabletop and then come back for some packs. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the build itself. I'm going to start off with the weight because that's probably the most impressive thing about this whole build. Coming in just under 16 grams dry weight. So with a 250 battery, then that can get us in a all-up weight of around 23 grams, which is that's pretty light for, I mean, 23 grams is like, that used to be dry weight on some of these quads, these little whoops. So yeah, there's some compromises here though. I think the least of the compromises is probably the NewBeeDrone light frame. It's definitely a little bit noisier, but I don't think it's so noisy that it makes the quads like untunable and unflyable, so I think that's a reasonable trade-off. I also think the canopy I'm using, so if you haven't tried these canopies, I think you really should. This is one of the better things I've designed. So when they print flat, and then this wide part screws down onto the frame, and then it bends over and these pull it back. So this actually results in a very sturdy, very light but sturdy, it's sturdier than it looks because you're getting a lot of stability out of the base of this, more so than you'd expect. So although it's a super lightweight, I think it's like half a gram or something like that, it's actually a really sturdy camera mount. Now for the camera itself, I think this is probably the biggest compromise, is that this is the Runcam Nano 3, and the field of view just isn't super great out of it. And I'm going to show you that when I fly. It's kind of a little spoiler alert, but that's probably, I think, the weakest point of this build at the moment. Other compromises I made to get it under 16 grams is, here's my VTX wire. So I went ahead and cut it down, so I pulled off that extra like bell part. And yeah, this reception is definitely not going to be as good. This is not what you're going to be using if you want to go ahead and fly behind stuff, upstairs, downstairs, things like that. You know, if you're kind of trying to get reception through walls and things like that, this is not how you want to go. But if you're in an open space, like on a track, you know, if you're racing the whoop, it might work out just fine for you. And that's going to save you a good little bit of weight. The other thing that is saving me quite a bit of weight, and I'm going to show you just the board. I filmed this a little section before I actually built it up. But I'll show you, this is the Hummingbird Racer edition of the board, and it's got some interesting tricks to really get the weight down. And it really, like without the board, I don't know if I'd be looking at a sub 16 gram build. Other things I did, I went for the motors, I kind of went middle of the road, happy model, so they're a bushing motor, not super smooth, but they're lightweight and nice and efficient. I've got the Gem Fan bi-blade props. Got a PH2 connector. You'll see based on flight time, the PH2 is doing more than enough on this build. And I think that really covers it, you know, on the build. It's got Express LRS built in. Yeah, so let me put this up in the air and I will show you the good and the not so good of this particular build. Alright, so let's check out this board before it's all built up. So this is the Racer edition of the Hummingbird V3. And what you can see is that it's exactly the same board except some stuff is missing, which is good for weight savings and more challenging in other ways. So one of the things that's missing is right here. So normally our USB These are the USB pins right here, and so instead of it being soldered on, NewBeeDrone just kind of gives that to you in the package. And apparently the thing to do is you just, if you want to update the board and stuff in Betaflight, you go ahead and just plug in and kind of hold that there while you're doing the updates. Now obviously that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but you know, theoretically this is not going to be like a workhorse board. This is going to be a set it up once in Betaflight and then fly it. So hopefully it doesn't make me too crazy. The other thing that's not on there is the battery pigtail, so you got to solder that on yourself. And then the motor plugs. So these are the motor plug pins right here that normally that connector attaches to, and then you got the two grounding pads that it anchors to there. On the top side of the board, it does come with the regular kind of typical VTX little UFL, and for the receiver, like they did on the regular board, it's got a little UFL antenna. This one hardly weighs anything, it's like 0.04. But I'm going to try and save some weight on the VTX by cutting off the little, what we're calling this part, this kind of shielding thing. I know this improves reception, but I want to try and push the weight limit here. So I'm going to cut that off, strip enough wire down to get it for a, for appropriate for a 5.8 gigahertz, and see if I can get enough reception without the weight of the bell. I think I can save probably about 0.2 or 0.3 grams there. This USB connector, again, that's another 0.2 grams. So, we're saving potentially half a gram with those things. And the board says a 5-in-1 board with receiver and with VTX built in. The weight here looks pretty impressive at 3.26 for kind of the naked board without anything soldered on or plugged into it. The connector that it comes with is the NewBeeDrone PH2 connector with the gold pins. I butchered mine, so what I was trying to do was I was trying to just trim the plastic off the end here, because what I like to do with my connectors is bend them at 90 degrees to limit how much to shorten up the wire. So as you plug it in, if this is coming off the straight and back, then the wire has to make a bigger loop, versus if you can bend it at 90 degrees, then you can go ahead and save yourself a little bit of length with the wire. So when I chopped up the red plastic part, the pins just basically were too loose, they just kind of slid out. So then I went ahead and just pulled some pins out of a regular PH2 connector, and I slid these gold pins in. You can see this very tight, very close there, so I will slide a little bit of shrink tubing over the positive lead just to make sure that this doesn't touch and short. And this isn't super sturdy in there, so this definitely is going to be one where you plug it in, you want to push the wires in if you're going to do this little ridiculous modification that I made right here. But anyways, so that's what the board looks like on the bench built up, and 3.27 grams, so pretty nice weight for a 5-in-1. All right, let's throw some packs in the quad. First up, I'm going to do the NewBeeDrone 250 Nitro Nectar, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to do kind of my little open course kind of flying to show you the flight time on that. And then after that, we'll go and do the WeBleed FPV 300 and show you the flight time there. Then I'll throw in another pack and show you some kind of more freestyle flying and some of the interesting things there. All right, so let's get this pack in the quad. And flip over to the other video. There we go, got that one. Take this video down there. Yes. So hopefully I can get through this battery without crashing. But that has been sometimes a bit of a challenge with this camera. So with this quad, it does several things in the air really well. One of those is that it just scoots. Like when you get a little power, this thing leaps upwards. It, you know, to use some of the cliche phrases, climbing like a scalded monkey come to mind. But we got there because the weight is so light, and one of the big compromises made is with the camera. So lenses weigh a lot, but lenses are important. And the thing I struggle with the most on this quad, I'll actually show you on another battery, is the lack of field of view. It, to me, just makes it harder to really see your surroundings. And so I was, you know, I wanted to get this camera to do this type of a build, but I don't think it's, oh no, how did I get it stuck? Hang on a second. So with this camera, to me it's kind of like, it's great for this concept build sort of thing, but beyond that, beyond putting it on a scale, I don't know if I'd really want to fly this as a daily driver. I'm sure you can get used to it, but I think you're giving up something in terms of, you know, not being able to see. It has, I think, less fisheye than some of the other cameras, but for whoops, I think you need that fisheye because I think you need that field of view. If you don't have it, I just find it really hard to navigate these small spaces. The other thing, so I'm sure, as you can probably see, as I come around this way, you can see the VTX breakup. I think it is, shoot, I should have really stuck with just what I said I was going to do, which is just fly that clean open pattern, but instead I'm trying to like show things and probably ruining the precision of my flight time demonstration. But yeah, when I come back around here, I definitely see more VTX breakup. It's not dramatic though, for the most part, and I think it's livable. And so I think that is one of the areas, you know, if you're flying in an open space, I think it's a reasonable one to go and save the weight. Because what I see through the goggles is, for VTX wise, is perfectly flyable. Camera, lack of field of view, flyable, but again, I think you can kind of see how I struggle a little bit. I feel like I have more room than I do, and I just clip stuff quite a bit. Oop, dog. So, but look at this flight time. This is a little 250 cell. We're at solidly over 3 minutes. And this is a lot of, you know, on power flying, not a lot of hover. So that's a pretty decent little flight time that we got going here. We at 324. Some of this is these Happy Mile motors. They are pretty efficient as compared to, especially the Beta FPV, but they're more efficient than the NewBeeDrone motor, bearing motors. I think I'm going to call that. So 348. Let's see where that rebounds to. 3.55, 3.56. So I probably could have pushed this to 4 minutes. And got 4 minutes out of a little 250. So next up, let's go ahead and throw in, so this is going to be the 300 cell. Okay, so what was that? Something was unhappy there. Seems okay now. Hope that wasn't an ESC going bad. So with this quad, I left it on, it came with Blue Jay 0.19. It is at 48 kilohertz on the frequency. And I just left it there because of that whole USB thing that we have to hold the USB on, because I was just a little afraid that I'd be trying to flash the ESCs and that I would brick it by accidentally moving the USB while trying to reflash it. I know Ciati really says, go back to 0.16 to be safe, but I left it at 0.19. I know 0.2 is definitely where they're like Blue Jay saying roll it back. If you're on 0.2, roll it back to 0.19. But I left it at 0.19 for team with the quad, and I figured that was a safer bet than bricking it, trying to reflash it. But, alright, so we're flying on the 300 cell. Oh. And what's interesting to me is on the 300 cell, I feel like I don't feel the weight as much because we've saved weight in the build elsewhere, that I think you can go to this bigger cell and not really get as punished by the weight. To me, this still feels pretty light and not carrying too much momentum and pretty easy to manage. So we're at 230 and we're still seeing 3.6 volts, over 3.6 volts, so that's good. See if I can get a clean run out of this one. Did I already crash on this battery? I know I nipped something. I don't think I fully crashed though. So we're at 3 minutes. And I'm sure some people, obviously people are going to be harder on flying than I am. Some people are going to be harder on the throttle and drop these batteries faster than I am here, but I feel like this should give you a pretty good sense of how fast you can fly, which is pretty fast here. Not skill-wise, but just on the throttle-wise. And get a good flight time out of it. So we're at 340, still doing good on the voltage. And I start to run out of things to say because that battery just won't drain. But look at that, 4 minutes, and we're still showing 3.5 in the air. That's a solid. Oh, kid appeared. Where he spawned from. I was not expecting the kid to spawn at the fridge. Alright, so let's get that back up in the air. So 3.4, so 3.46, 3.43. I'm looking at 4 minutes 40 seconds here. So, I should have the throttle on the side so you can see. Okay, I'm going to pull that in and call that a battery. See where it rebounds to 3 points. So I pushed it a little bit. But it's getting 3.48, that's not bad, and 456. So I think very safely you could go 4 minutes 45 seconds on that 300 cell. All right, so I'm going to go back to the 250, and now I'm going to show you the stuff, some of the stuff that I like and some of the stuff I don't like about this build. All right, now that we got kind of the flight time stuff out of the way, one of the things that this quad does really well is, I'll show you here. Fair warning, I am going to crash this some. But one of the things it does really well is it just hangs for days in the air. That is definitely more so than any of the other builds I've done, but it's, to me, it just has like a lot of float. Sorry about the janky flying, but it's kind of hard to like demonstrate just how much it floats, because it just floats forever. So that is one of the things that this build just really does well, is if you want to huck it around, and if you have a little bit more room in particular, I think you'd really enjoy that. Now, the stuff it doesn't do well. I think you've already seen the VTX breakup, so when I come down here, that short little antenna does not give quite as good of a picture, but I think it's livable. I think it's tolerable. I can still see. I know that what you're seeing through the computer is probably a little bit worse than I'm seeing in the goggles, but this for me, I can still see. But if you're trying to fly like, you know, downstairs or upstairs, something like that, flying through walls, then I don't think that you want to make that mod to the VTX antenna. Oh shoot, I think I got that stuck. The other thing, and I think for me is which is the true deal breaker on this camera, is I don't have the field of view I want. So for this big stuff here, and for also another thing, the way this thing just climbs, it like when you give it throttle, it just climbs. But when I'm trying to fly, sort of my usual kind of like track is like this, is back in here, and I'm trying to come in here and fly through that, and then wrap around here and get through there. That's where I really struggle with this camera. The other thing that's hurting me here too is I feel down low on this hover. I feel like I'm either going up or down. I feel like I'm dropping in and out of the power band on these motors. And I think that's just a function of this quad is so light that to get it down there, it's just not easy to stabilize it. I promise you, I can normally kind of fly through this pretty quick and nimble. And for me, this is kind of like more of a struggle than it usually is. And so one of the solutions there is, I think, just dropping the KV, which you get even more flight time out of it, which is not a bad solution, but I still don't think that that really solves the lack of field of view. I just feel like I need more field of view to be able to come through that with any kind of pace. Like I can do it like I'm showing there, where, you know, I'm going really slow just to show you. But normally what I feel like I can do is I do this little loop around like that, come down here, do this hard 180, line that up, get back in here, and get through that in sort of a cleaner, flowinger motion than what I'm showing you there. And I can do it, but I am struggling. It's taking like all my effort. You know, it's harder. So I think part of that, drop a little KV might help, but the camera for me is kind of a no-go. All right, well, I'm gonna call that a battery. I feel like I've shown you what I wanted to show you out of this build. All right, so yeah, so I scratched an itch. I'm going to do a follow-up on this because I'm not completely satisfied with the build. For me, the biggest thing is what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the RunCam Nano camera out. I'm going to put a NewBeeDrone BI. I normally fly with the 199C, the LDARC 199C. It's a little bit lighter than the NewBeeDrone, but since you've got the connector, and with the BI you just plug the connector straight in, convenience is you know, kind of a nice thing there. So I'm going to pop that on, see how it does with that. And then if I'm still struggling with that low end stuff, I might play around with either just flying it more, getting used to how it flies on 300 size batteries, which is not a bad option because you pick up the flight time. Or go the other route and maybe pick up some lower kV. So these are the 26,500 kV. I don't know, maybe dropping it down to 24,000 kV. I don't know about 22. 22 might be a little too low. But I think if I drop down some kV, try and pick up a little bit of that low-end resolution. And I'm not flying this on full throttle. You know, around the house inside when I'm flying, you know, when I'm punching out, I'm getting like 80% throttle. So I think a little low, you know, sacrificing a little bit of the top end to pick up some low end and then get the side benefit of better flight time. Sounds like a nice kind of thing to me. Only downside about that is it's another 40 bucks of, more than that, it's more, whatever, set of motors, 60 bucks, I don't know, whatever it is. Yeah, it's a set of 4 motors, so that kind of sucks a little bit. All right, we'll do some follow-up videos. But yeah, I've been bashing this flight controller around, and no issues that I've seen with it. It does some funny VTX stuff. If you smack it really hard, sometimes things get stuck up on the VTX, like it'll say AMD or some things like that. So there's some quirks there, but overall, I'm kind of a fan of what they did with this board because it's a nice performing little board at a very, very nice lightweight, and I think the price is pretty reasonable too. Especially if on a new version they fixed a little issue with the FETs so that the pins aren't facing the solder pads. If they change that out, then, and if this board holds up, that's obviously a big F. But that might push this board into like a, you know, strong recommendation versus right now, to me, it's a very interesting board. And if you're interested in experimenting, go for it. But I'm not sure I can say, hey, I highly recommend this board just yet. But yeah, till next time, cheers.